All right. So good afternoon, everyone. So I want to use this lecture to deal with the public sector aspect of our audit. So public sector audit, how it's like. All right. And it's an area where it's you have to apply all the things that you've learned in the private sector too. All right. So I'm looking at government external audit. And when we talk about government external audit, we are talking about an independent body that is auditing government entities or public entities. So we know from public sector, when we talk about public institution, we are talking about the covered entities or covered entities. I mean, the central government, which is the MDA, and the local government, MMDAs. We are talking about public institutions like schools and corporations like GMPC, all those things. All right. So government external audit focuses on auditing those institutions. Okay. Now, we need to understand that basically the purpose of this government audit is about four things. Okay. Number one, we want accountability. So how are these institutions or bodies or entities using the funds they need to account for? And when they are accounting to us, we need to know that they are doing it fairly. That's why we need to audit them. Two, everybody demands transparency. This is at the key of everything, all right? If you pay taxes of 200 cedis, if you are using the 200 cedis to do something, we need to know. All right. And we also need to find out those that we've entrusted our money to, are they people of integrity? So then the last key thing is 3-in-1 value for money. All right. And when we talk about value for money, we are talking about economy. We are talking about efficiency and effectiveness. All right. So these are the purposes of government external audit. Now, in Ghana, the institution set up for this thing is the audit service by law. But we also have international bodies like the way we have ICAG and IFAC. All right. So we know that we have IFAC, INIT, the IASB, and those setting the standards for us. It's also the same thing. When it comes to audit, we also have the audit setting body, the IAASB, International Audit and Assurance Standard Board. All right, so they set the standard. So when it comes to the public sector side, just as the IFAC branch helps with the IASs for the financial reporting, and there is an IPSAS for the financial reporting for audit, public sector. The same way we have the ICES, International Auditing Standards for private sector. The same way they are developing another one for the audits. All right. So that is what is happening. So we have Supreme Audit Institution. Supreme Audit Institutions. Those who are responsible for the auditing government revenue and expenditure. We call them the SAIs. And like I said, their major role is to oversee public funds. All right, and also to ensure quality and credibility in the financial statements. So, and credibility in all the financial information, all right, that they will give us. Also, we are looking at fraud and mismanagement. This is public sector. I mean, it has been said that they waste resources a lot. Now, the Supreme Audit Agency in Ghana is the Audit Service, which is headed by Audit Agency. All right. Then, internationally, we have the INTOSAI. All right. The INTOSAI is just an international organization of Supreme Audit Institution or organization. So international, oh, international. So this is it, international organization of the Supreme Audit Institution. So each of these ones they form a body, and Ghana's SAI also belong here. All right. So it's just like the ICA belonging to IFAC. All right. So what do they do? So they've come together to basically improve government audits, government external audits. Okay, external audits worldwide, because they are a world body, and also to determine standards. So framework, they've developed development of framework. So they are working on audit standards. Then the audit standards that they are working on, so we have the ICAG, the International Standard of Supreme Audit Institutions. Okay, so that is that. Then together they come in experience sharing. Okay, so they share their experience. This aspect of the syllabus, which goes for 20 marks, is a expression based. All right, so you need to understand. That is why I'm taking my time to discuss it. All right, so that is that. So they like I said, they are into this ICAG. So we are talking about the international standard of Supreme Audit Agencies or Supreme Audit Institutions. So we have the ICAG. That is the standards that they are developing. They have 4 levels now. So what we need to do, and they've been examining it, so we need to be careful. So they have level 1, and the level 1 talks about the fundamental principles. Fundamental principles. We used to call them the Lima Declaration. Okay, so we had the Lima Declaration. But now it is the ICAG one now. So these are standard, like the way, so now everything is becoming standard, this standard, this standard. Okay. But so what do we need to know about this? Because they can tell you that go ahead and give the principles. All right. So what are the things underneath these ones? So what you need to know is that they are stressing on certain fundamental principles. A key one is the independence of the government external audit agency. So the government audit agency or institution. So in this case, we are looking at what the audit service. All right, how independent are they? But their independency, we know, especially in Africa, how these things look like. So their independency, they go ahead to say that their independency must be anchored in legislation, i.e., it has to be in the law, constitution. So that independency should be anchored in legislation. And not just any kind of legislation. We are talking about a democratic environment where rule of law works. Rule of law works. Okay, so nobody is above the law, that kind of thing. All right, so that kind of thing. Now, they go on to say that if you have these principles, if you have an independent government audit agency, and if you it is anchored in legislation, then it should allow you to review deficiencies or deviations. Okay, so when you conduct your work, review what deviations on these government agencies. Deviations in terms of legalities. What do I mean by that? When you go to the public sector, everything is law. So if you go to GMPC, for example, they have laws governing their operations. So unlike the public sector where you go and they will have, they are talking about private sector, you go, we are talking about the internal controls. Here, the internal controls are legal. All right. Everything, every expenditure has to be explained via law. And also deviations in terms of value for money, the 3 E's. All right. Are they deviating from it? Okay. Because the thing may sound legally okay, but are they chopping money in the lens of legality? So it's something that you need to also look at and probably talk about. All these are in the fundamental principles, the ICAG one. Now, if you realize that there have been deviations, what then do you do? Then it means that you make those people who deviated accountable. So you make responsible people responsible for the deviations accountable. And what are they saying about that? So progressively, these are things you should understand, and it's not be something you should kind of memorize or anything. All right. So we are talking about making them accountable. And when we say making them accountable, it means that if they deviated, we need to collect compensation. And that is where Ghana, for example, we fall short. People deviate, but we don't collect anything from them. They go free. But they are saying that if the public sector is to work well in terms of audit, then these things should happen so that when you do that, this thing will serve as what? A deterrent. I can tell you things keep happening and happening because of no deterrence. And that is what we, this generation, have come to really appreciate, probably in the military regime. Well, we know that nobody wants military regime, but some aspect of these happenings tells us that we've come to know that in the time of Rawlings, these things wouldn't have happened. And so we are coming to terms with those things now. So once you do that, then you, apart from these deterrents, you take steps. You take steps all right, to prevent it from happening again. So this is the Lima concept, the level 1, future happenings. And how do you do that? In terms of doing that, they preach, what do we call it? The pre-audit and the post-audit. So they talk about pre-audit, and they also talk about what? Post-audit. So you remember in your level 2, we call this one internal check and internal what? Auditor, where this thing is pre-mortem, meaning that you check it before it happens. All right. Then post-mortem. All right. So after the thing has happened, you come in and do. So here, basically what they are trying to say is that if that is the case, then have internal auditors. Then we have what? The external audit. So that is what the level 1 preaches. Okay, so basically that is it. But so the post-audit is where we want to see punishment once people are faulted, so that there will be deterrence. Okay, so you make people responsible. So that is what the Lima concept is about. And so they have a whole section for that one. So the section is also talking about the same thing as you see here. So what is saying, it has a whole chapter. Oh, sorry. Trying to see if I can squeeze a space to do a further expansions, but I'll probably need to go to a next page. All right, so they have a whole chapter for the Lima section. Now, so to be able to have all these things that we are talking about here, they have a section in the fundamental principle. And that section, so let's look at what is there. So it is this principle expanded in a section. So what is the section dealing with? The section is just saying that there is a need for internal and external audit. So like I've explained. So that is one. It also, if you saw about independence, that was even the first point. And we said that the independence should be constitutionally backed. All right. Should be backed by. Then they also have the relationship with the SAIs with Parliament, so the relationship to Parliament. It should be clearly stated. All right. In Ghana, we have that. All right. Not only to Parliament, but also the relationship to the executive. So we are talking about the government, the administrative part, the executive. All right. Then powers of legislation. What do you mean by that? Their ability to as very important. And it's also talk about the audit staff. So it means that you need to have ethical staff, all right, and reports. a report that they give to, they give Parliament and also to the public, right? The public. So that sums the Lima section and the level 1. All right. Now we look at the level 2, which entails a lot. The level 2, and they examine these things. That's why I'm taking my time to talk about it. The level 2 talks about the prerequisites. The prerequisites. So it's like the prerequisite audit. So we are talking about the prerequisite for the SAIs. What should be there for the SAIs can manifest themselves in the principle? So we look at the ICAG 10 to discuss that. Now, there should be independent constitutional enshrined SAI. So the independence is stressed here again. And it has to be what? Constitutionally enshrined. And that doesn't mean that the executive cannot do anything in terms of the audit service. If there is any part of an organization or any part of the government or any place that the president wants, the cabinet wants the auditor general to go and do an audit, they will go and, but that doesn't mean that they are infringing on their statement. All right. Then again, not only the independence, they also talk about the protection of the heads. The heads of the SAIs. I mean, their job is risky, so they have to get some kind. So these are the 8 pointers. All right. So in your exams, when they talk about the 8 pointers of this level, you need to understand one is independence of the institution, and then the protection to the head. Then the discretion they can exercise. All right, in exercising their function. Because they are auditors and you can't regulate them like that. You have to leave them. That is where the Domelongo issue gained popularity. Then you have to also grant them unrestricted access to information. Because if you set up, so I'm looking at the audits, all right? So unrestricted access to information. You cannot establish certain institution and still not have give them power to have right access. Then they also talk about the right and the obligation to report. To report their work. You remember early this year, they issued a report on social media, and the president was mad, and they had to find ways and means to let them withdraw that. These are all things that has to be there. They have to be able to report. All right. And what they are reporting, they should have freedom to decide content. To decide content. You cannot corner them and the timing of audit. All right. Yes, you have to. The last two talks about they should be financed well. Okay, so financial autonomy, which imagine the auditor general auditing entities and they default in certain things and they find them to use the money of that fine or the compensation to fund the audit work? Wouldn't it be great than every day fund allocation, the money is not coming and they are not able to do their work well? Personally, I believe that maybe it's an area I need to work or do a paper on. Making people responsible and taking compensation to run the Ghana audit service. So that one, people will stand well. Then the last one is to follow the SI recommendations. Okay, SAI recommendations. So if they finish their work and they have recommendations, and there has to be some follow-ups. All right. So these are the things, the prerequisites. Then the 12 talks about value and benefits. The ICAG 12, and this one too has been examined before. Value and benefits. But I mean, take your time, listen to this video probably again, and appreciate it. It's not something you need to really memorize. All right. Now, this standard talks about the benefits. Well, the benefit is equal to the purpose. We are talking about value for money. We are talking about what? Accountability. We are talking about transparency. And we are talking about what? Integrity. So it's the same thing, the benefits, value and benefit. Now, how would these things be achieved unless you can what? Provide them with independence. All right. Number two, unless they conduct themselves effectively and efficiently. Okay. And in doing so, it tells you that there has to be some credibility in their work, and also they must be trustworthy. So it is out of these three we can actually have these benefits. All right. So that is that. Then the ICAG 20, the 20. So we have the ICAG 20, which talks about the principles of transparency that we are talking about. So, ICAG 20. So we look at 10, 12, 20, which are what we call principles of transparency. What are we talking about? It's just two elements. When we say transparency, we are talking about what? Openness and honesty. So basically, that is it. All right. Then ICAG 30, they have ICAG 40. 30 talks about code of ethics. I mean, that one. Then 40 talks about the quality. All right. And that one to use the same thing in the, what do we call it? The private sector. So that is that. Okay. So now let's look at a very interesting part, which talks about the public sector audit itself, the public sector audit. Public sector audit. All right, so let's look at the level 3 and the level 4. So the level 3 talks about the fundamental audit principles. All right, level 3 is about the fundamental audit. And the level 4 details the fundamental audit principle. So I'm going to add the two up. So it provides details of each one of them. Now, first of all, so you see the level 3, we are talking about fundamental principles of public sector audit. That will be ICAG 100. All right. Then 200 will be audits. 300 will be the various principles. So let's look at them. So first of all, the 100 gives us the purpose of public sector auditing. We've talked about that. So we look at it from the perspective of purpose of PSA. This PSA is not public sector accounting. I'm talking about public sector auditing. All right. Fundamentally, it is to provide purpose is to provide what we call legislation. The legislature talked about the independence, remember. So, and also to provide what oversight bodies. The oversight. We talked about that. The oversight. We are talking about, they are providing these people, all right, the legislature, the oversight bodies, and let's say those charged with government, those charged with governance. So in every entity of the public sector, you have leaders charged the board, all right, so the boards. So the purpose of public sector auditing is to provide these people with information, provide them information, independent and objective assessment. Independent and objective assessment, all right, on what? People's role on stewardship. So, yeah, the Adena sounds, how is it going? Stewardship, not only that, and also on performance. How are they working well with it? Performance, so we are talking about the stewardship of the people, all right? So how are they doing? And performance of the government policies and programs. So you know that it is the policy and the programs that run the entire business. Everything controls. So how is the controls doing in terms of the controls herein are the law? How are they doing? All right. So that is level 3. Level 3, it talks about the purpose, and it also ends with the, what do we call it? The 3 types of public sector audits. The 3 types. So I will look at the types in detail. So the types of PSA, please, public sector audit, not are the audit of financial statements. We call that one financial audit. So when it comes to the financial audit, there is no difference between the financial audit and the audit of external. So that is the ICAG 100. So that is where, when it comes, the answers look like the same thing that we've done in the private sector. Then we have number 2, performance audit. Performance audit. So what is the performance audit? Then we come to the 3rd one, which is compliance audits. Compliance audits. So these are things we look at in detail. Compliance audits. Now, we know that this one, is the audit of financial statement. And what are we doing? Whether the presentation is in accordance with financial reporting standards, right? Yes, so this one looks at presentation. All right, whether everything that they have done is in accordance with relevant FR financial reporting. And not only that, regulatory standards. Don't forget, these are published regulatory framework. That is something you need to understand. Then, when it comes to performance audit, what are they doing? When it comes to performance audit, we are measuring performance. And what performance are we measuring? Performance of the policies. All right. So we are looking at the institutions and the policies. So performance audit talks about how the institutions, how the programs, how the interventions, so like free education, all right, are working in accordance with VFM, value for money, the 3 E's. How are they working in accordance with the 3 E's? Okay, so that is that. Then when it comes to compliance audit, we are looking at the fact that everything is backed by law. Everything is done by law. So we are looking at how the transactions, the activity, all right, and transactions of these public sector entities and any information are materially compliant or materially complying to the governing authorities' laws and regulations. So when you take GMPC like this, there is a law for GMPC. When you take GRA, there is a law for GRA. So the governing authority, they have laws. So the laws, we have regulations, we have rules. So how are their activities, their transaction, information flow? How are they complying to the laws and the regulations? So financial audit is the financial reporting standards and the regulatory standards. Performance audit is how the institutions, the programs, the interventions are doing well as measured in value for money, not legality, value for money. They can be legal, but they are not doing it in terms of value. All right. And compliance is how the activities, the transactions, and the informations, everything that they do, they are complying to the laws and the regulations governing that. So that is level 3. All these things are level 3. Now, the last level, which is level 4, talks about these things in detail. All right, so let's look at them a little bit in detail. All right. So what I'm going to do is to divide my board into 3 and look at them each. So we talk about financial audit here. Talk about performance audit. Okay. Yes. talk about compliance. Okay. So now, first of all, we need to understand the objective. So in terms of objective, don't forget, we are looking at the same thing being like what the external. What are the objectives? We have one, evidence that reasonable assurance, right? Number two, what report? So you give your, right? So you now need to understand when it comes to this reasonable assurance versus limited assurance. By this time, you know them, right? Limited assurance. All right, so that is that. And when it comes to this side, the objective is measurement against what the VFM value for money. All right. Then when it comes here, we have the objectives. We have two. So we will look at what we call. Let's look at what we call attestation engagement. Depends, like this one, whether it's reasonable assurance. Talk about attestation engagement. But don't forget, we are looking at how you comply to the laws, right? And we will look at the next one we call the direct. Look at the direct. So it's either you have an attestation or the second one, we call it the direct one, the direct engagement. All right. So we now look at these things. So let me start from here. So I've already given you the main objective is 1, 2. And so how do you do it? So you start with planning, right? If you are going to do the audit, start with planning. And planning, you and I know that you need to what do understanding the entity and its environment, which is ISA 315. All right. What do you do? And you need to also do risk assessment. You remember that, so we don't stress much on that. You remember AR is equal to what? IR, CR, DR, where these two are called what? RMM, risk of material statements. You know that. And so you remember that in doing these things, one of the things you take note is what we call professional skill. So, and that one to be dealt with it. The same thing external. All right. So we also learned in here that you need to plan the audit. So you remember audit plan. When you are going to do it in terms of your planning, there is audit plan. You remember what goes into the audit plan? Audit strategy, audit plan, audit strategy, audit plan. So those things go back to that. But you are doing all these things with your eyes centered on the users. Who are the users of financial public sector? We are talking about legislation, the legislature, parliament, about the public. All right, so take note of that. Take note of that. Now, once you are able to do this, the entity and its environment focus on the organogram, the HR, the internal audits, the industry, all those things that you think. Then it talks about conducting the audit. So you've done your planning, you are conducting the audit itself, which you all know what you do. You know the risk, so you do the risk assessment. When we talk about risk assessment, how material is it to the financial statement? And so you remember that we talked about materiality. All right, but in public sector, they are key fraud. Is there fraud? They are also key. Is there what we call subjectivity? Too much subjectivity. Is there a related party? Public sector and nepotism. Check for that. Non-compliance to the laws. Non-compliance in all these things. So in responding to these things, you need to do, in response to this risk, you need to gather evidence. You know that. So you do what we call, you gather evidence. So evidence. How do you get evidence? Evidence is obtained in two main ways. We have test of controls, and we have what? Substantive testing. And in the substantive testing, you remember the example. But here your assertions are these ones. The fraud, are they fraudulent reporting? Public sector fraud is not just about the reporting, it's also about misappropriation of funds. So that is the question you need to ask yourself. All right. Then once you gather them all together, you can issue your report. And don't forget the elements, all right, of an audit report. So that is how the ICAG 300 and 200 deals with the financial audits. Now we come to the performance audits. We've told you that it's about how they are performing their work in the scope of value for money, which is economy. So what is economy? Economy is getting the thing cheaper but quality, right? Yeah, so that is the good. Then efficiency. When we say somebody is efficient, what does it mean? It means that he's able to make the most out of the small. All right. So we are talking about more output from minimal input. So the output here, we are talking about both quantity and quality. So please take note of that. So for more output from the minimum input. All right. So that is that. So whatever we give you, make the most of it. Then we have effectiveness. Effectiveness is just about target meeting, right? So you achieve your target. So whether the target is qualitative or quantitative, by effectiveness, most of the time you use quantitative. So achieve target. Right? So that is that. In all these things, you need to identify the users. I mean, the three parties involved here, we are talking about the what do we call it? So here, remember the elements. You should remember the 5 elements. All right. So take note of that. Elements of assurance. All right. We did it in our first lecture. All right. So the subject matter, the 3 parties involved, what the standard, the evidence, and the report. So when it comes to performance audit, key here is the 3 parties involved. All right. So take note of that. Now, the audit criteria here we are looking at both quantitative, as you see, quanti and quali. All right. So quali mainly the value for money. All right. Now you have to also assess risk. So the risk areas, you look at quality of information and the accuracy of it, because you are doing value for money. So if you are doing value for money audit, your main issues are the quality and the accuracy of inputs. All right. That is the main thing that in terms of the audit process, it's the same thing. You do planning, but here is basically arranged in this. So you do planning, you also design, designing your audit. Then you move on to methods of collecting data. All right, methods of collecting data. So unlike the financial statements, the methods of collecting data, we have surveys, we have questionnaires and all those. So questionnaire can even be under survey, all right? Or you can also use what we call a meeting, the small groups, all right? Interviews, okay, observations, all right, all those things. Now, when you are able to do this, all that you are using these things to do is to gather evidence. So that is evidence. All right. So that is it. But evidence, make sure you have sufficient, appropriate evidence. All right. Then when you finish, you give findings and conclusions. So you realize that this one is also a form of what we call direct engagement. I will explain to you why. It's a direct engagement. It's a direct engagement because you are reporting conclusions and findings. So first of all, we talked about the criteria, the audit criteria. We talked about the evidence. Once you compare your findings against what? The criteria. So the criteria, we call it what should be. What should be. Okay. And the evidence, we call it what it is. It is. So once the findings and conclusion is comparing the evidence versus the criteria. Okay, so it is comparison. Okay, evidence versus criteria. Then in that you check causes and effects. Causes and effects. Then what do? You do what? The effect, you need to kind of come out with the effect. Is it what we call, is it coincidental? All right. Is it coincidental? Is it cause and effect? So we say that cause and effect. So C versus E. Cause and effect. So I mean, if I do something, there is an effect to it. All right. If I don't learn, the effect is I fail my exam. So that is what you in terms of the effect analysis. Then what do? You also check reverse cause and effect. So what does it mean? I failed my exam because I did not learn. Have you seen it? One is that I didn't learn, I failed my exam. The reverse is that I failed my exam because I didn't learn. All right, then we have coincidental. So that is the four coincidental. Coincidental is that the thing, it just happened. I mean, I learned, but I failed the exam. But it's something. I mean, I probably I was admitted in the hospital, right? So then we have confounding effect. Confounding effect. Okay, so confounding effect is like a multiplier effect. So I didn't get a good job. So you get it. So from not learning to not what we call failing the exams, all right, there's coincidental effects too. Then there is confounding effect. At the end of the day, okay, so I couldn't get good grades, all right, in total. And the next one, I couldn't get a job. So that is what you go on to do. So when you go on to check the effects, then the next thing for you is to give your conclusion. Now, when you give your conclusion, what then do? You what? You give recommendation. Okay, give recommendation because of space. Let me see. Yes. So you give recommendation. So it's like doing a research paper. Give recommendation. And when you give the recommendation, you have to follow up on the recommendation. That if it has been affected. All right. So that is that. That's it. Now we come to the compliance audit. You already know what compliance audit is about. So you are measuring the activities, the institutions, and the financial transaction in terms of, and every information in terms of its compliance with laws. So we have attestation. You see, the attestation is just like this one. Why? Because there is a standard. There is a standard. And what you are doing, so the standards, the standards are there. And the financial statement, which is the subject matter, all right? So we say the subject matter is prepared by who? Who? Those charged with governance. So the auditor doesn't prepare that. Here, the value for money standards are done by the, basically the auditor, all right? So that is that. They determines what value for money means and what you should have done and what you shouldn't have done, right? But here you have the subject matter, which is the financial statement prepared by who? Those charged with governance. The auditor just come in to compare what you have done to the standard and give attestation. So that is what we mean, and attest it as whether it complies or it doesn't comply. So the laws are there, the standards are there. You now provide us what you have done. We will now compare what you have done with the law. Find out if you complied or you didn't comply. So that is what we call the attestation engagement. All right. So that is that. All right. Now, when it comes to the direct, okay, the direct, what happens is that the auditor is responsible. The auditor is responsible for the subject matter. All right. So the auditor is responsible for the subject matter. So that is that. Now, so the auditor so let's say the auditor is here. He now determines the subject matter. All right. Okay, so that is that. Then he produces the subject matter. Okay, so once he produces the subject matter, then he now will go ahead and decide the control. All right, so that is that. I call it the ACT. All right, just a minute. Yeah, so like I was saying, so auditor sets the subject matter. Now set the audit, what do you call it, the criteria, all right, so audit criteria. Now, once he does that, then he will now come out with conclusion. So when I told you that this one is in the form of a direct audit, that is what I meant, all right, direct engagement, right? So that is that, all right. So the conclusions are findings. So findings, and the findings are are to answer questions. All right. So it answers questions. So that is how the compliance audit, and they will also give recommendations. So basically, that's that. That is that. All right. So what you need to understand, therefore, in the compliance audit is the scope. All right, the scope. So when we talk about the scope, we are looking at the subject matter versus the criteria. All right. Okay, so that is that. So it means that the audit team that are going to audit should be people who understand the subject matter and the criteria. All right. The criteria is very, very important. So in your question, they can bring it, they can give you a case study of somebody who is just came in and let you assess, like the way even in external audit, private, they give you cases like that. So understanding the SM, the audit team understanding the subject matter and the criteria is very, very important. Right? Then the methodology, we know the same methodology in terms of getting information, the AEIOU. All right, you can have R28, rate performance. After recalculation, there's also rate performance. All right, so all those things are there. But their report has 4 major principles, and that principle we have to learn it because 4 principles for reporting in compliance compliance audit. So those are key. So the first one, so we are looking at 1, completeness. How complete? You know these things, that everything is inside, right? Completeness. And 2, we are talking about objectivity. All right, we are talking about objectivity. So I decided to give this thing to you in an acronym forward. Good. All right, so good. O for completeness, C for objectivity. Then A for what we call a contradictory process. So a contradictionary process. Checking facts. All right. So we call it a contradictory, or I can make it COCA. All right, so that you can also, so COCA is fine. I think COCA is fine. Yeah, COCA is fine. So instead of a, no, the A is time. So I mean, let's keep it like that. So a contradictory, sorry, a contractionary process. What am I saying? It's contradictionary process. What do we mean by that? You are just trying to check facts accuracy. How accurate are the facts? Facts accuracy. Then number 4 is that the report has to be timely. It's timeliness. So you have to provide it time. So that is. So the last thing I'm doing here, before I go on to probably talk about the Auditor General, which I believe I've done in our previous audit class, but just to provide it, and the institution itself, just to give you some outlook, so that when they come to talk, you see, sometimes they will say talk about the audit service, talk about the regulatory bodies, talk about the Auditor General. So when it comes like that. So let's look at the attestation engagement and the direct report engagement. I'm just showing you the reporting side, all right? So, and the direct reports engagement. All right, so yes, they all have titles. So those ones, they are uniform ones. I'll put in them. Yes, they all have titles. So you title them, right? But these ones, they may have address, all right? So that is that. This one, you need to come out with the subject matter, but here you have an executive. All right, so that is that. So the SM info is also there. You do a description of the SM info. So probably I should do the SM info. But this one has executive summary. This one has executives. All right. That. Of course, the criteria that is them. The key thing is that here, once you give the opinion, so you give an opinion, the opinion, they have to reply. You have to attach their replies, all right, their responses, and you sign. All right. So that is the major thing. That is the major thing. All right. And here too, you get your findings. Like the performance audit, you conclude. You compare the findings to the criteria, right? So you conclusion. Here too, then you get their replies and you do recommendation. You follow up. All right. So these are some distinguishing stuff inside it. Right? So basically, that is it. So all you need to know is that you need to understand the SAIs, the into size, then the levels, right? So the level 3 and 4 is what I've combined. The level 3 talks about these three things. The level 4 goes into details as I've gone into details. All right, but take note of this. I feel is something worth. Now let's just look at the auditor general. Those there. All right, so pick one and some general overview of the public sector. So we said that in the first place, the Constitution Constitution has enshrined powers in the audit agency, just as it audit service. So just as it has in GRA, the same thing here. Now we have the head being the Auditor General, and not only that, he has a board. The Auditor General, the audit service has a board. Now the board has a one public officer with him. All right, so and other people. So it has a board that we should take note of. All right. Now, what is his major role? Now, the role is to audit public account. And the Constitution defines public account. And the PFM Act has also repeated it. So we talk about the courts, right? So those of you who have done public sector, the courts, the central and the local government. That's the MDAs and the MMDAs. Okay. The universities are parts, and public corporations. All right. And the public corporation. In fact, schools, SHS serve are parts, operate corporations. All public, right? Now he needs to have some rights. Key ones are, these are his responsibilities, his role. You need to have rights. His key is to right of access and also to assess. These are key important things. Right? Like I said in our last lecture, he has independence. All right, he is established by Parliament through Constitution. It's actually established by the Constitution. All right, so that is it. And he has some independence. Like I said, sometimes the cabinet can ask him to go and do one, but it doesn't mean they are infringing his independence. Now, we all know that in Ghana, according to the PFM, accounts are prepared by by Controller and Accountant General. All right. So they prepare it according to the PFM. And they are supposed to be done by February, all right, of ensuing year. So let's say this year, 2022 came somewhere in February, all right, so you have to get that. Now, once it's done, the Auditor General, the AG has 6 months, shall within 6 months after the year. So after the year, so 6 months would be what? Somewhere June, right? Yes, to report to Parliament. All right, he will conduct his audit and report to Parliament. Okay, so that is very, very key. When he sends to the Parliament, he has to highlight the irregularities. He has to highlight it. Don't forget that the Auditor General has even power over Bank of Ghana when it comes to foreign exchange transactions. All right, foreign exchange transactions. So they have to report to the auditor foreign exchange transactions. Please take note of that. All right, so it happens. So happens. Okay, foreign exchange transactions. It happens. All right. Now, 6 months Parliament debate. So we take it to Parliament, highlighting those issues. Parliament debate. And they will refer it, all right? They will refer it most of the time to a committee we call public interest account. So that is that. All right. Now, what happens is that if that is the case, they will PIAC will give most of the time 2 weeks notice. All right, they will give you 2 weeks notice on issues. Then they highlight the issues, and they will call you for public hearing. You come and they will ask you the question. But before you come, it's not like you came and you already know what they are going to do. So you prepare and come. And we all know it is done on television, public. All right. So that is what happens. Okay. So that is what happens. All right. Now, what you need to know from this point is that when PIAC finishes, they send a report to Parliament. And most of the time, we used to have ARIC. We used to have ARIC, Audit Report Implementation Committee, Audit Report Implementation Committee, who will look at the recommendations that were given by the auditor, Auditor General, even from PIAC that it has been presented. But in the coming of the PFM Act, it calls on all these people, especially the corporations, these ones, all right, to have audit committees, have audit committees in these corporations. All right. It has come up that all these people will have audit committees, and once you have audit committee, like the way we learned in the private corporate governance, you know all their functions. So we are not going to talk plenty about that. So they are supposed to have audit committees. So these people are exempted from the ICAG concept. They are supposed to all have audit committees. All right. So please take note of that. All right. So that is that. Then when the Auditor General is performing his functions, there are places that he checks. He checks your performance. And by performance, he uses ratio to discuss liquidity and your solvency. He also checked if you make payment appropriately to the consolidated fund. All right. Have you made all your remittances to the consolidated fund? Check for fraud. That is what he knows. He also checks for the internal control weaknesses. How we have internal auditors, but these things happen over me. Internal control weaknesses. All right. So please, these covered entities are supposed to have. It covers all these ones, not even just this one. It covers the covered entities. That's what the PFM has said. It said the covered entities. So the covered entities are these ones, and plus anybody who receives public funds and is responsible to pay it in the consolidated fund. So if you receive public funds and manage public funds, you are also supposed to have audit committee. So that is that. So like I was saying, so they will check the internal controls, which means that you are supposed to set up internal control system. So they will check it up. Then they also do value for money. So it doesn't leave them to. They also do value for. And it's just that if you offend these things, if you are, if you fall into offenses, the offenses mainly are proper, inappropriate bookkeeping. So the offenses are in respect of bookkeeping and falsification of information. Falsification of information and suppression of information. All right. So these are the stuff. These are the offenses in public sector, right? In terms of where we are. Yeah. So that is mainly it. Okay. So that is that. So the PFM has come to cancel the concept of the ICAG. It calls on all these people to have audit committee. And the audit committee are supposed to prepare annual statements. Annual statements. So please let me highlight that. The audit committee, they are supposed to prepare annual statements and tell us how they are dealing with remedies. Dealing with the remedies, because the ICAG could have done that. So they are dealing with the issues. So they have to do that now. All right. They have to do that. So that is that. That is that. Basically, that is. Don't forget we have the Internal Audit Agency. So every MDA, industry department, and what for authorities, municipal district assemblies, also municipal ministries, we have department agencies, then we have municipal district assemblies, metropolitan. So they too have the internal audit. The internal audit agency, what they do is that they will employ internal auditors for these people. And the internal auditors are supposed to do a report to to the director of the IAA. All right, so they are supposed to furnish them to the director. Of course, their report also goes to the directors in these individual places, so the management in these places, and also to the director general for the general audit agency. So that is that. These are what you have technology in terms of public sector. But the way they will ask the question will be a direct, straightforward way where you see. But so you are supposed to bring everything, your understanding around this area. So they can ask you in terms of the Auditor General's independence. I mean, he's constitutionally backed, but however, cabinet can tell him to do one or two jobs in terms of audit. That doesn't infringe on his independence. All right. And they can tell you how they ask the questions. So we meet in the intervention class. We have special questions that we use deal with in terms of. So this ends our public sector aspect of audit. I am fully persuaded that you'll be answering questions. Take note. All right. So that ends this class for public sector. I hope you have time to watch and probably rewatch, and all the best. Right. Like I've already told you, in terms of the current issues these days, keep it. ICA wants to regulate. They said it's in their law, so they are regulating non-assurance audits. So non-assurance services and how that non-assurance service conducted by a person can actually infringe upon objectivity into the assurance side. All right, so self-review is. And key also is that these days the IT issues, so the CAATs, and lastly, sustainability and accountability. So sustainability, all right. So basically, these are the things that you can look at them in terms of the current issues. All right, so all the best and have a great day. Bye-bye.